Hey guys, this is Jerry. So, picture this is 431 BC. So there's more than 400 years before Christ was born. This was before the Roman Empire. This was before Carthage. And what we have here in the Mediterranean that we're going to explore today is a conflict between the two superpowers. So we have Athens and its allies versus Sparta and its allies. Athens and its allies were called the Delian League, and Sparta and its allies were called the Peloponnesian League. Now, if you think about what war you've probably heard about, maybe this will ring a bell. The Peloponnesian War. What does Peloponnesia stand for? Now you know. It's what the Spartans called them and their allies. So they're the Peloponnesian League. So 431 BC. I have a little map here. You can kind of see a little bit what the balance of power was. And you can see at this point, Athens had a lot more territory than the Spartans and its allies. And to explain why Athens, at the start, right, it seems like Athens ahead. So let's look at why Athens is ahead. This is a map. If any of you have seen 300, remember, this is Sparta. So about 100 years before, right, the Persians, who are the people here, they've launched two invasions of the Greek. Everyone knows about 300, where the Spartans on the last day made their heroic stand so the rest of the Greek army could retreat. The sequel to 300, the Rise of the Empire, I believe it's called, basically completely decided to not give credit to the Athenians. If you remember the ending of the sequel to 300, the Spartans came and saved the Athenians, which is complete bullshit. But what happened was, there's a little city here called Salamis. The Athenians destroyed the Persian navy there, and then the Athenians led the Greek armies and won a bunch of battles, and then they eventually pushed into Persia. So that's why you see that Athens during the Peloponnesian War had all of these territories. The Athenians, besides being known for Socrates and philosophy and Greek plays, remember in high school you probably read some of their Greek plays. The Athenians were extremely skilled sailors. They had a navy. Their navy was like the Spartans of the sea. So, no one could really beat the Spartans at this point on land, but no one could really beat the Athenians on sea. Before we continue, I want to make it clear, I don't want to give an event by event breakdown of this war. This war, went on for many, many years, and if I were to try to do what Thucydides did, basically Thucydides is the person that wrote almost the definitive account of this war, because I believe he was on the Athenian side, and then they fired him or exiled him because they didn't like what he did, and then he kind of got to observe it from both the Spartan side and the Athenian side. Anyways, if you want to read about every single battle or 90% of everything that happened during the Peloponnesian War, go read Thucydides. My aim in looking at the Peloponnesian War is to kind of learn some lessons from it and get sort of the general. So maybe this is more like a macro look at this war. Here's another really cool map. All the yellow is Athenian territory. One thing I want to bring up, and this is something I have not been able to find much of online or in history books. And the Athenian Empire actually isn't just limited to this area, from Athens to the Dardanelles. I finally found a map that actually shows the extent of Athenian colonization. Look at here. This is the Black Sea. So you see the very top. If you go through the Dardanelles, you go into the Black Sea. And this is actually where the Athenians got their grain. So, of course, being Athens, you could farm around your city, right? But the Athenians sailed almost 1,500 miles, I believe. That's how much it is. They sailed 1,500 miles all the way through the Dardanelles, through the Black Sea, to really fertile lands in the Ukraine and the Caucasus areas, and They got most of their grain and their farmland from here. That's something I have to emphasize, because when I studied ancient Greek history back in middle school, they did not emphasize that. There wasn't as much emphasis on how much they traded and how much they shipped. 400 BC, and they're going 1,500 miles to the Ukraine area, planting their crops here and then shipping it all the way back to Athens, man. It is quite a journey. If you look at most of the cities that were part of the Spartan alliance, most of them are kind of landlocked. I think Corinth is the only one that kind of had a port or something. So when Athens and Sparta finally went to war, Athens knew one thing, which is that we rule the seas. So as long as we can beat the Spartans in battle on the sea, we don't have to engage them in the land. And the reason why they didn't have to engage them by land, here's something really cool. This is Athens. They had a super long wall that went from the city of Athens all the way to their port. This is their port. So basically, what the Athenians could do is just, okay, all this farmland around them, yes, the Spartans would come burn it all, but they could hide everyone in the city right here, and then have their ships, their fleet that no one can beat, go all the way through, get grain here in the Dardanelles, go all the way through the Dardanelles and get grain here in the Ukraine and ship it back into the port. Whatever the Spartans and their allies would try to do, the Athenians would beat them at the sea, so the shipping lanes would never really be a problem, and then they just carry grain and feed the population. So it's a brilliant strategy. You don't fight their battle, you make them fight your battle. This was going to be a war that was going to be a long haul war, because if the Spartans are at the gate or at the wall hacking at your wall, being like, come fight us, fuck you guys, you pussies, and it's going to take years for them to give up, right? And then you're going to be fighting over territory and allies. That's basically what it's going to be. Sparta's going to try to take your allies from you. Sparta's going to try to encourage your allies to rebel against you, and you're going to try to encourage Spartan allies to rebel. And so what you'll see, if you really read up on this war, a lot of it is them fighting proxy wars. You know, they're helping their allies, or they're fighting somewhere here, and then there's actually both the Athenians and the Spartans went all the way to Italy, to Sicily, to fight each other there, to help each other's colonies. If you know the outcome of this war, you know that the Spartans actually won. So how did the Spartans beat the Athenians? If it looks like the Athenians had everything, I mean, the Athenians had the navy, they had the wall, they had the grain supply that the Spartans couldn't get to. So what happened? Why did the Spartans win this war? This is Sparta! So we can break up the Peloponnesian War into 3 parts. There's the first part, and I would describe the first part as basically harassing colonies and allies and supplies. Second part is the proxy war portion. They call it the Sicilian expedition. So very different things happen during the first versus the second portion of the war. And the third portion is when one side loses. This is, I would classify this as the Spartans starting to catch on. So let's go through each one of them and explain what happened, what are some great lessons we can learn about warfare, about politics, about history, etc. So the first part of the war, basically, the Athenians follow what they laid out during their initial plan, which is, let's use our ships, let's carry supplies, and let us just not take Spartan bait and fight them on land. Because a good analogy to think about this is, Athenians were the whales, they were the sharks, and the Spartans were the tigers, they were the lions. So you don't want to fight a tiger on land if you're a shark. You want the tiger to fight you in the water. And so for the first year, the Athenians do it brilliantly. The Spartans try to, they hack at the walls, they try to attack the farmland. The Athenians are like, okay, we give up our farmland, you burn our farmlands, whatever, we can ship our supplies from the Dardanelles and from Ukraine. And then something unexpected happens during the second year, during 430 BC up here. Remember this? What happens, do you think? You see Athens right there? If you put all your people into Athens, what happens? Well, if people are living close together, let's think about this. When your coworker, one of your coworkers, let's say has the flu or gets the cold, he or she decides, oh yeah, I'm gonna be a trooper, I'm gonna come into work and show that I'm still committed, that a disease can't bring me down. Well, then what happens? He or she spreads disease to every single person working in the workplace. So if you jam all the Athenians into the city, you're going to have sanitation problems. Anything that could be contagious will be contagious. And 430 BC, some sort of plague, historians don't really know what kind of disease it was, but some sort of disease breaks out. And Athens loses a third of its population by the time the disease goes away. So that was, there's all these X factors, unexpected things. And that is a humongous, unexpected thing that I don't think anyone thought about. Pericles, the leader of Athens, even dies in this plague. But somehow Athens fights on. And because, ultimately, even though they lost a third of their population, their shipping is still not destroyed, right? They're still getting their supplies. So for the rest of it, from whenever the disease ends until 421, the Athens and Spartans, the Athenians and the Spartans take turns harassing each other's colonies, harassing each other's supplies. The Spartans are attacking Athenian mines because they're thinking, hey, if we can disrupt the Athenians' ability to trade and ability to pay their soldiers, then they have to give up. The way Spartan society was built, Sparta had what's called Helots. These are slaves. These are people from the surrounding regions that they enslaved. And basically, while the Spartans were busy becoming warriors, the Helots did all their farming and all their other basic duties. So the Athenians decided, let's try to establish little bases on different parts of Spartan territory so that it'll give more incentives for the Helots to rebel, because if the Helots, who are the foundation of Spartan society, if they rebel or leave their post, then it's sort of the Spartan equivalent of destroying the supplies of the Athenians. So the Athenians were trying this way of destroying Spartan sort of infrastructure. So the Athenians and the Spartans are taking turns harassing each other, trying to convince allies and everyone to leave one side, join the other side. And this is a cool little map that I downloaded online. Basically, if you look here, the first phase in red is sort of some of the major battles they fought during the first part of the Peloponnesian War. And it's basically pretty stalemate. Athens wins some, Sparta wins some. And the last battle was at Amphipolis. And what happens in Amphipolis is that the Spartan general and the Athenian general, both of them, the most pro-war of the bunch, die. They die in that battle. And so after that battle, both sides, because they lost their most hawkish general, they're like, maybe we should reconsider this. So they decide to have a little bit of a truce, a little bit of a peace. But of course, these two superpowers are still at odds with each other. So the peace is short-lived. And then the second part of the war is kind of a more proxy war. Basically, things happen in Sicily, which is off the coast of Italy. So this is far from Greece, right? And both Athens and Sparta go over to help their colonies and their allies. So they're fighting in Sicily. And then the major takeaway from this part, the second part of the war, is that Athens gets its butt kicked in Sicily. The general that was most responsible for formulating the Sicilian plan, they kind of slight him, and they don't actually send him over to fight in Sicily. So he's like, you guys don't appreciate me, you guys are always plotting against me, and he defects to Sparta. This general named Alcibiades, it's really hard to say his name, Alcibiades, very talented naval general, and they don't use him during this part of the war. So he's like, fuck you guys, I'm going to Sparta. So he goes to Sparta, he helps train their navy, basically, the thing that the Spartans couldn't do, which was fight on sea, he starts the process of them being able to fight on sea. So the Athenians really messed up during this phase of the war. And then 416 BC, not really that important for
this history, but very important for political science and international relations literature theory, is what's called the Melian Dialogue. Basically, there was a little island called Melos that was neutral, but the Athenians wanted to force them into the Athenian League, also known as the Delian League, and the Melians were very naive. They were saying, no, we're neutral, and plus, why would you fight us, and blah, blah, blah. I'll do another video on that another time, but very important for social science / political science reasons, so I wanted to point that out. This happened during the second phase of the Peloponnesian War. Things just are not looking good for Athens, right? First phase of the war, it was stalemate, but they still ended up losing a third of their population because of disease, an X factor they didn't think of when they were formulating plans for war with Sparta. Second phase, they get their butts kicked. They lost in Sicily. They lost a lot of their army, and one of their best naval generals is defected to Sparta. But if you look here, Athens still lives to fight on for a long time. So what happens? How did Athens recover? One brilliant part of the Athenian war plan was they actually set aside some ships, sort of like your emergency arsenal. So if everything is lost, then we pull these ships into service. So they kind of saved a little, right, into a little like emergency fund. And so they mobilized the emergency fund, those ships. And then on top of that, they realized they messed up. So through various ways, they convinced Alcibiades, the naval general that's now in Sparta, they convinced him to come back. It's actually more complicated in that he actually helped plot like a little revolution. But basically Alcibiades is back now, helping the Athenians fight the Spartans. So through these various reasons and many others, Athens kind of recovers and it fights, and it's winning a lot of battles again. But the thing is, by the third phase of the war, Sparta's been fighting and losing on sea, but it's kind of learning, right? You learn from your mistakes. You slowly learn how to fight better at sea, and it had Alcibiades help them a little. So Sparta's getting better fighting at sea. On top of this, someone comes in on the Spartan side kind of financially, right? We're fighting a war of attrition, so whoever can get any supplies that can give you an advantage over the other side, that's welcomed. And the Spartans get a major supplier, and that's the Persians. If you remember from before, the Persians were getting their ass kicked by the Greeks when the Greeks were unified. And so maybe the Persians weren't the best at fighting, but you know what they were good at? They were rich, right? If you look at the Persian Empire, I have a little map here of the Persian Empire, and I have it sideways. This is the Persian Empire. You see how big the Persian Empire is? The way the Persian Empire was, they had little sort of autonomous regions that served the king. They were called satraps. So every satrap ruled and sort of had local customs, and so it could pull from very, very different regions. And so the Persians were very rich. And hey, what's better than my enemy fighting himself? Let's help them keep fighting among themselves, right? That's what the Persians were thinking. So now Sparta started having all the resources it can. So if its ship got destroyed because it couldn't beat the Athenians, what the fuck? We'll just build more ships. Our pockets are very deep now. On top of that, the Spartans, as I said before, started learning to get better at fighting on sea. So they beat Alcibiades at his own game. The naval commander that was winning all these wars for Athens loses to a guy named Lysander, a Spartan commander. So the Spartans are getting better on the sea, and they have endless supply to keep building ships. So that was 406 BC. It was the Battle of Notium when Alcibiades loses. So the Athenians are like, oh, you lost. So they kick Alcibiades out of Athens again, and then Alcibiades leaves. So they kick their best general out because he lost the battle. And then 405 BC, the Athenians, even though Alcibiades loses and he's out of the Athenian command now, they still have a lot of other great naval commanders. 405, the Battle of Arginusae, if I'm pronouncing that right, the Athenians actually still beat the Spartans, but something happens, which is through misfortunes, they aren't able to finish off the Spartan ships, and then the Athenian ships get caught in a storm and end up, a lot of the sailors drown. So now the Athenian high command, the people in charge are mad, And you know what they do? They get mad at the generals, all the top naval generals, that even though they won the war, they still lost a lot of men, so they execute all the generals. So Sparta's winning and learning and getting better at naval warfare. Athens is just killing off its top generals or getting rid of their top generals and just, in general, mismanaging their war effort. And on top of this, during the third part of the war, the Spartans, because they started getting good at fighting on sea, they finally started pressuring the Athenians where it mattered. The Spartans started pressuring the Athenians in the Dardanelles because, after all, their grain supply came through the Dardanelles, right? So if you cut off their ability to feed themselves, so they couldn't get their grains from Ukraine, and they couldn't get their grains from the Ukraine through the Dardanelles, they couldn't get any of their grain from here, then they'd starve. With the ability to replenish themselves through Persian funding, and with Athens' best general gone, and now Athens also executed all its other naval generals, what do you think is going to happen? So, 405 BC, the Battle of Aegospotami. These Greek words so hard to pronounce. If you look at the map, it's right here, right at the Dardanelles. So now you cut off the ability of the Athenians to ship grain, right, through the Dardanelles. Now Athens is screwed. And then within a year they surrender. Oh, by the way, not only did they beat them there, they actually destroyed their fleet completely there. So Athens got screwed. And then they surrender. And then what's really funny, and I'll do another video after this about this, but Sparta didn't actually end up ruling Greece either. So basically the two empires ended up weakening themselves so much, and then eventually Thebes beat Sparta, and then Alexander the Great from Macedon beat all of them. So it's kind of funny, you know. There's so many great little lessons to be learned from this, but one thing is, dude, if you guys can find a way to get along, if you're the same people, why don't you get along? Because all this did was it weakened Greek power until the Macedonians, which, you know, they were a Greek city-state. They ended up taking over everyone. But let's go back to the whole entire war and think about little lessons we learned. One lesson is, there's always things you're not going to think about when you plan your brilliant war strategy. Did the Athenians think that plague would break out and kill a third of their population? I mean, maybe if a third of their population didn't die, this war of attrition would have ended differently. Maybe Athens would have actually won eventually. That X factor, all these little things you don't think about. And then, of course, you really have to, when you're fighting a war of attrition, you have to have great military. Alcibiades, man, a lot of scholars think if he fought in Sicily, Athens wouldn't have lost so badly during the second part of the war. Athens just kept mismanaging its military. Third part of the war, they did that too, executing your top generals. I mean, so military is so important, right? So find the right people. There's a lot of parallels, by the way, to the Civil War, American Civil War. Like the South was so good for a while, and then the North finally found a good general in Grant and Sherman, and then the North had all the industrial power, so they could lose a lot more people, but they could still replenish them, and the South couldn't. It's kind of like here in this case, Sparta, you know, they might have not been as good at naval warfare, but they could just keep losing ships, and they'll just rebuild them through all the funding they got from the Persians by the third part of the war. But Athens couldn't afford all of that. So a lot of great parallels, and then of course the Spartans ended up getting better and better naval commanders. The final lesson to all of this is your supplies are so important. Right? You're fighting a war of attrition. You're in it for the long haul. So you need to be able to figure out a million ways to outlast and feed yourself when shit goes down the drain. And the Spartans eventually courted the Persians and got Persian funding. The Athenians, you know, their navy was good, but unfortunately, you had a little choke point here in the Dardanelles, right? There's a little choke point where all your grain from the Ukraine over here went through. So I'm sure if the Spartans were better at sea during the first part of the war, they would have attacked here, but took them long enough to learn that this was the lifeblood of the Athenians. So interesting, man. Don't extend your supply lines. And of course, there's a lot that I haven't covered, right? The Peloponnesian War, I mean, Thucydides wrote a huge book on it. So you guys should do your own research, look it up. There's a lot of great, fascinating parts about this war that we just have to glance over because, again, my history channel's not trying to be a history book, right? I want to learn from history. I want to break down history, look at some of the general trends, right? So that was our first video. I hope you guys like this. Athens versus Sparta. Sparta beat Athens. So next up, we're going to look at Thebes and how Thebes ended up beating the Spartans. So I thank you guys so much, and I will talk to you guys next time.